Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. This week I have a new mic. It is a blue ball. Blue balls. Blue snowball. It's a blue snowball. Blue balls. It's like this.
Look at this, I got a blue ball.
If I had two of them, it'd be...
I've got two balls, two blue balls.
Worst case of rock nuts ever. I guess giving a snowball and getting a snowball are two separate things, you know what I mean? Yeah.
It's pretty clear to see why a game like this never saw a release for the Sega Saturn outside of Japan. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not because of quality, because if the internet's right, it was a pretty popular game back in the day in the arcades. It was released in the arcade 3 years, 1991 to 1994, before it eventually saw an actual console release. It was originally called Rad Mobile and then called Gale Racer when it was released for the Saturn. And because of this, I believe it's more of a timing problem more than anything. One thing the West did have was a pretty good repertoire of racing games, come to think of it. But this is nothing so bad it couldn't have seen a release overseas. I mean, if we got Andretti Racing, NASCAR 98 and Cyber Speedway, the least they could have done is release this game to the Western world. But what I will say is this game holds a special place for me. Back in 1996, I was in year 8, about the impressionable age of 13, and the family went to Sydney for a holiday. The place, as far as I was concerned, was a dystopia that ran on babies' tears and traffic that existed purely through the city being planned by the dumbest people in this fucking country with no recourse or future planning. But there was a gem in the rough, and that rough was Sega World. It was a haven for gamers like myself, which was poorly mismanaged to the brink of bankruptcy in 2000. We went once, and once is all we'll ever go because it was so deathly expensive. One of the games at the time that was there, among many others that I loved, was Rad Mobile. I played it, and what stuck with me was the Sonic the Hedgehog keychain hanging from the rearview mirror. So, needless to say, when I heard the Saturn had a port, I was keen to play, and I got it for pittance, which is a nice addition. Presentation, the game needs to be broken up into two sections. The menu presentation seems to be alright with it being functional, with a picture of the car in the background and some bright text in the foreground. You know, in case we don't see it. Once we're in game, I have one or two problems with the way that it looks. The first few moments of gameplay has this map over to the left hand side which takes up too much real estate on the screen. In fact, everything takes up too much real estate on the screen, and it's a fundamental problem because it feels like it's encroaching on gameplay in a substantial way. It also could be a way for them to improve graphics if you only have to fill 2/3 of the screen. And I get that you're trying to give me the whole driving the actual car experience, but you could have given me a better experience if you dialed it back a bit and focused more on the road instead of what's around us in the car. This is a short list of things that have taken up too much screen real estate. In front of the car where the wheels are, time at the top right hand corner, location and rank over on the left, and the rear view mirror, which is more cosmetic than function. So the in-game presentation is a real letdown here. I'm very split with this game graphically. It has bad pop-ins, so the draw distance is pretty bad. It goes hand in hand with the gameplay, so I'll cover this more off there. It feels like they sacrifice detail for sense of speed. I mean, it doesn't look fucking dreadful, but it feels like they could have done a better port. The lines on the road look pretty bad, and I encountered several glitches such as being able to drive through other cars, and other cars ahead of me doing bizarre shit. The soundtrack is impossible to hear with the sound of the car being as loud as the music, and even then, it sounds like your typical 90s racer. Sound effects are pretty rubbish too, as they're mostly non-existent. Running into things gives you this kind of tinny sound which is supposed to represent a crash, the obnoxious sound of the engine, and the occasional skid. Minus that, there are no sound effects. Gameplay is different to most races. This is less racing and more remembering the course. I see the guys who play this on the YouTubes, and it's clear to me that they've played it enough to know exactly what's coming. To the point where, if you're at a position on the course, the cars will always be at that same position every time. So it's a memory type kind of game in the guise of a racer. And for me, I don't like it. It's less about randomness in the race and reaction times and more about knowing where you need to be at the right time. Just like with every racer, you still have to remember how to approach corners, and in that sense, you still have a certain sense of memorization about it. But there's the additional factor of having to interact with those on the course. And the other cars in this game seem to have very little relevance apart from beating them, which, if you know where you need to sit on the course, you'll beat them every time. I remember playing this game pretty well in the arcade, which is why I was a little disappointed to see the car in this game on the Saturn handles as sensitive as a freshly shaved scrotum. The problem is the car maxes out at 103 kilometers an hour, and it takes roughly 1 second to get to that speed. Now, I'm not saying it's missing the realism of modern driving simulators, but the problem I found is when a car can get that fast that quick, the roads were too fucking narrow. It's hard not ploughing to the sides constantly when the road is not wide enough, your car's quick to accelerate, and your steering's sensitive. It doesn't make for a fun time. Replay value is a 2-player versus and memorization of the course, and in that sense, it's pretty good. Would I recommend this game? Sorta. I can see others enjoying this game far more than I did, even if I found it had a lot of problems. It's also not the worst racer, but those who have fond memories of the game in the arcade will be happy to see it on a home console.